Nancy stood in the grand entrance of Celestine's, one of Portland's most upscale restaurants, her coat draped over her arm. The warm glow of chandeliers and clinking champagne glasses filled the air, but the elegance felt hollow. At 27, she was a self-made event planner, running a thriving business that landed her in a 6-page magazine spread. Yet, as her family mingled in their finest attire, her mother's cheerful voice cut through. "Nancy, sweetie, you'll sit at the kids' table tonight." Shock hit her like a cold wave. The kids' table? Plastic cups with cartoon characters awaited her, while her married siblings sat at the adults' table, smug and comfortable. The sting of being dismissed despite her success burned deep. This wasn't just a seating arrangement, it was a message. If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button to join our journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Nancy's heart sank as she stared at the corner of the private dining room at Celestine's, where a small table sat tucked away, adorned with plastic cups emblazoned with cartoon characters. At 27, she had built a thriving event planning business in Portland, orchestrating million-dollar weddings and earning a 6-page feature in a lifestyle magazine. Yet, here she was, directed to the children's table, while her siblings, Daniel, with his smug accountant's grin, and Bethany, laughing beside her new husband, sat at the elegant main table, surrounded by crystal glasses and flickering candles. The contrast stung like a slap. Her 8-year-old nephew, Tyler, swung his legs, engrossed in a tablet game, while 6-year-old Sophia scribbled on a paper placemat. Nancy forced a smile, sliding into a child-sized chair that barely accommodated her, her knees brushing the table's underside. "Aunt Nancy, you're with us?" Tyler asked, his grin wide and innocent. She ruffled his hair, nodding, but inside, a storm brewed. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "The children's table, dear. Since you're not married, we thought you'd be more comfortable with the kids." The words weren't just dismissive, they were a verdict, reducing her accomplishments to nothing because she lacked a ring. Nancy glanced at the main table, where her brother Daniel held court, his wife Courtney nodding along, and Bethany basked in their mother's glowing approval. That look of pride was familiar, one Nancy hadn't seen directed at her in years, not since she chose her career over the traditional path her family revered. "Mom, I'm 27, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "I'm not a child." Her father, swirling a glass of scotch, chimed in. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, Nancy. It's just dinner. The kids love you." His tone was patronizing, as if her feelings were a childish overreaction. The dismissal cut deeper than the seating arrangement. Nancy's mind raced back to moments when her family's approval had slipped away her college graduation, where her parents fixated on Daniel's promotion. The day she signed her first office lease. Met with her mother's tepid, "That's nice, dear, but when are you settling down?" At 24. She'd been too young for such questions, yet they persisted. Now, as she sat at the children's table, the pattern crystallized. Her success, her condo, her independence, none of it mattered to them. She was still the unmarried daughter, less than her married siblings. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, her voice barely audible. Her mother's smile tightened. "What was that?" "Nothing," Nancy replied, forcing another smile as she rose to check her coat, needing a moment to breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey, her business partner. "How's the family dinner? Hope they're treating you like the boss you are." The irony nearly made her laugh. As she handed her coat to the hostess, the children's table loomed in her mind, a symbol of how little her family valued her. Sophia's voice broke her thoughts later, tugging at her sleeve. "Are you okay, Aunt Nancy? You look sad." Nancy lied. "I'm fine, sweetheart," and listened as Sophia chattered about her teacher's pet hamster. But her eyes drifted to the main table, where her family laughed, oblivious to her absence in their world. A waiter approached, handing her a plastic menu with pictures, chicken fingers, macaroni, and cheese, a hot dog plate, while the adults savored leather-bound menus offering filet mignon and herb-crusted lamb. Something inside her went still. She had driven 2 hours, rearranged client meetings, bought a new dress for this dinner, and they had relegated her to the kids' table. The realization hit. This wasn't just a seat. It was a statement. They didn't see her, and maybe they never would. Nancy's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, her steps deliberate as she walked past the main table at Celestine's, avoiding the gazes of her family, her mother's tight smile, her father's Scotch swirling indifference, her siblings' smug comfort. The weight of the evening, the plastic cups with cartoon characters, and the condescending kids' table directive had piled up, pressing against her chest until she couldn't breathe. At 28, she had built an event-planning empire in Portland, orchestrating lavish weddings and earning accolades in glossy magazines. Yet her family saw her as less, unworthy of a seat among the adults because she hadn't walked down the aisle herself. Enough was enough. "Where are you going?" Her nephew Tyler called, his voice innocent but piercing. "Just need to make a phone call, buddy," Nancy replied softly, her heart racing as she headed for the coat check. She knew she wouldn't be back. The coat check attendant handed her jacket with a curious glance. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. "Change of plans," Nancy said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. As she slipped into her coat, memories flooded her years of being sidelined, her college graduation overshadowed by her brother's promotion, her mother's lukewarm response to her first office lease. The children's table wasn't just a seat. It was a symbol of how little her family valued her. She pulled out her phone and texted Kelsey, her business partner and closest friend. "Change of plans. I need that celebration tonight. I'll explain later." The cool Portland air hit her face as she stepped outside, the city's golden October trees glowing under streetlights. For a moment, she felt free, untethered from the expectations that had chained her for years. Her phone buzzed relentlessly as she drove to Bruno's Wine Bar, a cozy spot where she and Kelsey had spent countless nights plotting their business's rise. Messages from her family poured in her mother's confusion, her father's annoyance, her brother Daniel accusing her of ruining dinner. Each notification was a tug, trying to pull her back into the role of the compliant daughter. She ignored them, focusing on the road ahead. At Bruno's, the owner, Mauricio, greeted her with a warm smile, sensing her mood. "Your friend's in the corner booth," he said, gesturing toward Kelsey, who stood up, her face shifting from excitement to concern. "Okay, spill. What happened?" Nancy slid into the booth, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "They sat me at the children's table," she said, the words bitter. "Plastic cups, kids' menu, the whole deal, because I'm not married." Kelsey's jaw dropped. "You're joking." Nancy shook her head, the humiliation raw. "I left. I couldn't stay." "Good," Kelsey said, squeezing her hand. "That's insane, Nancy. You're a freaking rock star, and they treat you like this?" Mauricio appeared with a bottle of wine, on the house, as Nancy's phone lit up with notifications, 7 missed calls, 15 texts, her family's outrage mounting. Her mother, "Nancy, what's going on? Where are you?" Her father, "This is very rude." Daniel, "Mom's freaking out. What did you do?" Bethany, "You're ruining dinner." Nancy stared at the screen, each message a guilt trip, a demand to return and apologize for daring to value herself. But something had shifted. She wasn't the problem. "I'm not answering," she said, flipping her phone face down. Kelsey raised her glass. "Let them sweat." For the first time that night, Nancy felt a spark of defiance, a boundary drawn in the sand. She wasn't going back, not tonight, maybe not ever. Nancy's phone buzzed incessantly. A relentless barrage of notifications that lit up the screen like a firestorm. Her family's messages piled up, each one a calculated jab to pull her back into the role she'd always played, the compliant daughter who apologized to keep the peace. Her mother's texts were a mix of confusion and guilt-tripping. "Nancy, what's going on? Where are you?" Her father's were sterner, laced with disappointment. "This is very rude. We're all waiting for you." Her brother Daniel accused her of selfishness, while Bethany claimed she was ruining dinner. Sitting in Bruno's wine bar, Nancy stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The weight of their words pressed against her, but something new stirred a quiet defiance. She flipped her phone face down, letting the notifications stack up unanswered. Kelsey, her best friend and business partner, caught her eye across the booth. "You're not answering, are you?" she asked, sipping her wine. "Nope," Nancy said, her voice firm. "I'm done." The days that followed felt like a tug of war. Her family's calls didn't stop. 7 missed calls one night, 9 the next, 20 by midweek. Each voicemail from her mother grew more frantic, each text from her father more demanding. "Your behavior is unacceptable. You owe your mother an apology." Daniel's messages dripped with condescension. "Way to ruin dinner for everyone. Real mature." Bethany's were softer but no less manipulative. "Mom cried all night. Can you just come back?" Nancy's stomach churned with guilt, a reflex from years of being the peacemaker. She'd been raised to smooth things over, to shrink herself to fit her family's expectations. But the memory of the children's table plastic cups, cartoon characters, her siblings laughing at the candlelit adult table burned too brightly to ignore. She wasn't overreacting. They were wrong. Then, amid the chaos of notifications, a message from her Aunt Helen arrived like a lifeline. Sent at midnight, it read, "Nancy, I heard what happened at dinner. I understand why you left. Your mother called me upset, but I told her she was wrong. You're a grown woman with a successful career. You didn't deserve that. Call me if you need to talk." Nancy reread it, her chest loosening. Helen, her mother's sister, was different, independent, a freelance photographer who'd built a life on her own terms. Her words validated what Nancy had felt but couldn't voice. Her family's treatment wasn't just unfair, it was inexcusable. For the first time, someone in her family saw her, not as the unmarried daughter, but as the dose-year-old entrepreneur who'd built a thriving business from nothing. By Sunday, the pressure peaked. Her mother's latest text was a masterclass in manipulation. "We think you overreacted, but we're willing to overlook it if you apologize. We expect you at brunch." Nancy's jaw clenched as she read it again, the words dripping with condescension. Apologize? For refusing to be humiliated? She thought of her life in Portland, her condo, her company, the Thornton wedding contract she'd just landed, a $4 million project that could redefine her career. She didn't need their approval to know her worth. With a deep breath, she typed a response. "I won't be at brunch. I need space to think. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her finger lingered over the send button, the weight of the decision heavy but liberating. She pressed send. The replies came fast, her mother calling her dramatic, her father expressing disappointment, but Nancy felt a shift. She wasn't backing down. For the first time, she was choosing herself. Nancy threw herself into her work with a ferocity that surprised even her. The Thornton wedding, a $4 million extravaganza set against the Willamette River, demanded every ounce of her focus, and she welcomed the distraction. At 27, she had built her event planning business from the ground up in Portland, turning dreams into reality for high-profile clients. The Thornton project was her biggest yet 350 guests, a historic mansion venue, cascading flowers, and twinkling string lights that transformed the evening into something magical. As she coordinated with vendors and fine-tuned timelines with Kelsey, her business partner, Nancy felt a surge of pride. This was her world, where her vision and expertise commanded respect. Unlike the dinner at Celestine's, where her family had relegated her to the children's table. Here, she was in control, and the results spoke for themselves. Her phone, once a battlefield of family notifications, grew keener as the weeks passed. The calls and texts from her mother, father, and siblings dwindled from daily demands to sporadic attempts, as if they were testing her resolve. Her mother's voicemails still carried a frantic edge. "Nancy, this is causing problems for everyone. You need to call me back." Her father's texts were curt. This has gone on long enough. Even Daniel, her brother, weighed in with a jab. What's your problem? Stop being childish. Nancy let them go unanswered. Each ignored message a brick in the boundary she was building. Her mother once called it a family emergency, claiming everyone was upset, but Nancy saw through the manipulation. It wasn't an emergency, it was their refusal to accept her as she was. She turned her phone to silent and dove back into work, where her value wasn't questioned. The Thornton wedding was a triumph. On the night of the event, the bride glowed. The groom shed joyful tears, and guests marveled at the seamless beauty of it all. Nancy moved through the venue, clipboard in hand, ensuring every detail was perfect. Guests approached her, awestruck. Are you Nancy, the planner? One woman asked, clutching a champagne flute. This is stunning. Do you have a card? By the end of the night, Nancy had handed out Vengeful business cards and booked 6 consultations. Kelsey was beaming as they packed up. The bride's mother said this was the best wedding she's ever seen. She said, "We're gonna be booked solid for a year." Nancy smiled, exhausted but fulfilled. This was her proof she didn't need her family's approval to know her worth. Back at her condo, Nancy's phone still buzzed occasionally with family messages, but the urgency had faded. Her mother's latest text mentioned Thanksgiving, implying her absence would ruin it. Nancy deleted it without a second thought. She thought of Aunt Helen's words, the one family member who'd validated her. You didn't deserve that. That support, coupled with Kelsey's unwavering encouragement, anchored her. Work became her refuge, a place where her skills were celebrated, not diminished. As she reviewed contracts and met with new clients, Nancy realized something profound. Her family's dismissal didn't define her. She had built a life, her condo, her company, her reputation on her own terms. Each successful event, each new lead, reinforced her growing confidence. She wasn't the problem. She never had been. For the first time, Nancy felt free to live for herself, not for the approval she'd spent years chasing. The Thornton wedding wasn't just a career milestone, it was a declaration of her independence. Nancy's heart skipped a beat when she peered through her condo's peephole, seeing her parents standing in the hallway, their faces etched with a mix of anger and discomfort. The drizzle outside mirrored the gray tension that had followed her since the dinner at Celestine's. At 27, she had built a thriving event planning business in Portland, her name now synonymous with elegance after the Thornton wedding's success. Yet her family still saw her as the unmarried daughter, unworthy of respect. She took a deep breath and opened the door. Her mother pushed past, her voice sharp. We need to talk, Nancy. Her father followed, closing the door with a thud. You could have called, Nancy said, her tone calm but firm. I did, her mother snapped. You didn't answer. Nancy stood her ground. I told you I needed space. The confrontation unfolded in her living room, the sleek furniture and city view, testament to the life she'd built without her family's approval. Her father's voice was hard, accusing. You're acting like a spoiled child, Nancy. The irony wasn't lost on her not after they'd seated her at the children's table with plastic cups. I'm acting like someone with boundaries, she countered. There's a difference. Her mother laughed, a brittle sound. Boundaries? Is that what you call humiliating us? Disrespecting your family? Nancy's chest tightened, but she held firm. You disrespected me first, Mom. You sat me with the kids while Daniel and Bethany got the adult table. You made it clear I don't measure up because I'm not married. Her mother's face flushed. We're proud of you, Nancy. But the words rang hollow, unsupported by years of dismissal, her graduation ignored, her business brushed off. Nancy pressed on, her voice steady. When was the last time you celebrated my achievements? My company's growth? The magazine feature? You don't even ask about my life. Her father shifted uncomfortably. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a seating arrangement. It was a message, Nancy said, her eyes locked on his. Every adult sat at the main table except me. Because I'm not married, I'm less in your eyes. Silence hung heavy. Her mother's eyes brimmed with tears. "If you keep this up, you'll be on your own, no holidays, no family gatherings." The threat was meant to scare her, to pull her back into line. A month ago, it might have worked. But now, after the children's table, after relentless calls and guilt trips, Nancy felt something new. Freedom. "If that's your choice, I'll accept it," she said quietly. "But I'm not apologizing for valuing myself." Her parents left without another word, their car disappearing into the Portland rain. Nancy sank onto her couch, tears spilling not from regret, but from grief for the family she'd wanted and the relief of letting go. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Helen. "Your mother called upset. I told her to respect your boundaries. I'm proud of you, Nancy." The words warmed her, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Kelsey texted next. "Still up for lunch? You might need it." Nancy smiled, grateful for her chosen family people who saw her worth. As she looked around her condo, the life she'd built on her terms, she felt a weight lift. Her family's rejection no longer defined her. She was enough, and for the first time, she believed it. Nancy stood in her new office, gazing out at Portland's skyline, the city she'd claimed as her own. At 27, she'd turned her event planning business into a powerhouse, with the Thornton wedding sparking a flood of contracts that filled her calendar for years. Her family's calls had faded to silence, their absence a painful but necessary price for her freedom. No longer did she chase their approval, once a constant ache in her chest. The children's table at Celestine's, once a wound, had become her turning point, a spark that ignited her resolve to live unapologetically. She'd lost a family but gained herself. A life built on her terms, surrounded by friends like Kelsey who celebrated her worth. Refusing to shrink was her victory. If Nancy's journey inspires you to embrace your own, hit that subscribe button and join our community of dreamers and doers.